I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every Wednesday, photographers meet here to connect, inspire, and create. Our guest speakers share their images, tips and techniques, and a little bit of inspiration to help you improve your photography. The schedule for our upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com, as well as the links to previous sessions on YouTube. Tonight's guest is Lori Cash. Lori is a wildlife and nature photographer based in Hampton, Virginia. Lori's photography focuses on conservation and visual storytelling while bringing awareness about the biodiversity around the Commonwealth of Virginia. Lori is a member of the North American Nature Photography Association, also known as NANPA, and she's also a proud member of the Professional Photographers of America. Lori's won numerous awards for her photography, and just this week, her work was featured on the cover of 22 American Butterflies magazine. In tonight's presentation, The World of Wildlife Conservation Photography, Lori's going to share her tips and insights on how you can make an impact in the world of wildlife conservation photography. If you're on Instagram, look for her at LA Cash Photo. And please visit her website at loriacash.com, where you can also subscribe to her newsletter and check out her blog. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Lori. Before you get started, ma'am, I tend to gloss over people's bios. I try to get as much as I can find, but what did I miss? Is there something, that I should have mentioned that you'd like the gallery to know?
Well, I also recently I had a cover image on Virginia Wildlife magazine.
Okay.
With my a little fox kit looking up to its mama that was actually taken on Mother's Day. So I've had a good little run these last couple weeks with or months with some back-to-back covers on magazines.
So I'm curious, are you submitting them, or are they finding you through some form of social media? Or is this your full-time job? I'm not even sure if this is your full-time job.
Well, I recently made this my full-time job and became an LLC.
Oh, good for you.
And both of these covers came through actually photo contests. One, the American Butterflies also had a monetary award, and Virginia Wildlife is just a showcase issue that they showcase Virginia photographers through images that the photographers in Virginia submit. And I was honored to be the cover image for that issue.
Yeah, that's a beautiful shot. And last week, some of you were here, some of you were not, but if you missed it, we had Paul Malinowski do a presentation on cracking the code on photo contests, and that is on the YouTube channel. So if that's something you're interested in, you just emphasize that, hey, contests do get people's attention. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. I highly recommend photo contests because I've been getting a lot of recognition this year from numerous places that that I have made through a handful of contests this year. So it does get your name out there.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful, and I'm glad I'm glad that you can share that story because it just tied in with what we did last week. So that was unplanned, but that works out great. That worked out great. It emphasizes what Paul had to say. All right, with
Okay.
that, do you wanna jump into your presentation, or did you wanna say anything else?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
share my screen now.
sounds perfect.
Linda mentioned I am a member of NAMPA and the Professional Photographers of America. Um, and a little bit about the overview of tonight's presentation. I'll be talking a little bit about myself, just giving you a little background about my photography history. Um, we'll also talk about what is conservation photography and storytelling. And then we'll also touch base on the emergence of conservation photography. And then we'll go into the more specifics of wildlife conservation photography and the different types or styles of conservation photographers and storytellers. And then we'll get to the tips on how you can use your photos to help save and protect our natural world. So a little bit about me. I bought my first SLR camera, which was a Pentax K1000 back in 1990 when I was stationed in Maine in the Coast Guard. I, I always kind of grew up with cameras in my hand, but when I got there and saw the beauty of the landscapes of Maine, I began photographing landscapes and kind of learning photography on my own. In 1992, I moved down to the Virginia, North Carolina area and spent 20 plus years concentrating on bird photography. Because now here I was on the coast near the Outer Banks of Virginia, Outer Banks of North Carolina. And so a lot of birds there. So I started focusing on bird photography, and I learned a lot of my bird photography skills by studying from Arthur Morris, who's one of the most known bird photographer there is. I even took an IPT um, uh, down in Southwest Florida 1 year with him for several days and learned a lot from him. And I also, while I was just starting out in the early 1990s, took some college photography courses, one especially in wildlife photography and creative design. And the wildlife photography course is the one that really inspired me to move from doing landscapes to wildlife photography. And then over like my 30 years in photography, it's hard to believe that, but I've been doing photography since 1990. I have had the privilege to be published in a variety of publications that include the Virginia Wildlife Magazine and the American Butterfly Magazine, and some local conservation publications here with Our Common Agenda and the Wild Virginia blog. So I've been fortunate to have my images out there and to share them with other people. And from the very beginning of my photography journey back in Maine, I always wanted my images to inspire others to appreciate our natural world and wildlife. And probably if there was a field of conservation photography back there, back in 1990, I probably would have started out as a conservation photographer. always had that in my heart. So in 2020, I took a conservation photography course to develop my storytelling and writing skills. I've always enjoyed writing, and so I wanted to kind of develop them into more of a storytelling style to go with my photography. And since 2020, I have mainly focused on conservation photography and developing my storytelling skills. I've had the honor to have a couple article text packages posted online on several local Virginia conservation blogs. And I continue to pitch, article image ideas to magazines, looking to go more national as well. I pretty much have kind of created a good local niche here in Virginia with my photography. And one thing about the picture that I have here on the screen is a series of a brown pelican in silhouette at sunrise at a local park here in Hampton. And it's in the middle of, it's starting its head throw behavior series. And that morning, when I saw that behavior, which I had never photographed that behavior and seen it so much that morning as I did that morning, but that started the thoughts of, well, I would like to write a story about that. And that began my thought and my pursuit to change from just being a bird photographer mainly to being a conservation photographer, doing conservation, wildlife, and nature photography. So I owe the pelicans, the due for changing my gears in photography. I also have a blog, as you mentioned, Linda, and I regularly post there. I try to post, once a week and about my conservation journey, and also give out photography tips and techniques and share a lot of images because I love to share my images. That's why I love photography, is to share images that I photograph. And like most photographers, especially if you're doing it professionally, you kind of expand and do other areas of photography. So I do sell fine art prints and on-demand products through accounts at Fine Art America and Zazzle. And I also have a monthly newsletter. So if you'd like to sign up to that, I talk a lot about some of my in the field experiences. I have a behind the shot feature I do each month where I talk about how I took that image, and I just give monthly updates and just and talk about certain conservation issues that are going on. And I do just want to mention one last little note to share. I've been battling with a rare genetic rheumatological disease. It's called Behçet's disease, and over the last 7 years, and you may see it, and you may not see it. Might have seen it earlier when we were on the big screen, but intermittently my eyes do close, and my voice does change a little bit. So I just wanted you to be a little aware tonight. So if you see those things, But it does impact my photography, but I have a wonderful spouse who helps me out a lot. And so I just wanted to share that. Okay, so let's talk about what is conservation photography and storytelling. Conservation photography is a creation of photographic images that tell stories and inspires people to take action or change their behaviors or to advocate for conservation outcomes, protecting nature and improving the biodiversity in our natural environment. Some of the conservation topics that are very popular these days is climate change, barriers to animal movements such as wildlife corridors and crossings, land uses, water quality and quantity, and a couple big topics that I focus on is wildlife habitat losses and wildlife habitat defragmentation. Conservation storytelling is a powerful way to combine your texts and images by highlighting current conservation topics by using knowledge and experiences and even your connections with others by affecting change through the use of images and writing. The emergence of conservation photography is credited and was pioneered by Christina Mettermeyer, who is a marine biologist and an environmental activist. And she really developed the concept of the field of conservation photography when she created in 2005 the International League of Conservation Photographers, which is known as ILCP. And through ILCP, she provides a platform for photographers on environmental and wildlife issues. So before 2005, there really wasn't a field of conservation photography. And so since 2005, it's been growing, and it's really become really a popular field of photography right now. And the mission of the ILCP is to support environmental and cultural conservation through ethical photography and filmmaking, and that they believe that awe-inspiring photography is a powerful tool in preserving the environment. So now let's discuss what is wildlife conservation photography. We've talked a little bit about what is actually conservation photography. Well, wildlife conservation photography is pretty much the same thing, but you're dealing with conservation efforts that are solely focused on wildlife and their habitats. The wildlife images can be a major influence in creating areas of wildlife protection, documenting a species or a loss of habitat, an endangered or threatened wildlife species, and as well as just educating people on wildlife and our planet's natural environment. And then the picture here that I have displayed here of the eagle is probably one of the most best known conservation success stories there has been from when it was on the Endangered Species Act list to now being off the list. So spreading the word makes a big difference in conservation. And changing to kind of in 2020, changing over to concentrating on wildlife conservation photography, I worked on two main wildlife conservation photography projects. And one of the first things I did after deciding I want to do conservation photography, wildlife and nature conservation photography, I went looking around the local area where I live, around the Hampton area, and then throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I found an organization that had very similar beliefs that I did about conservation, um, habitat connectivity, and I volunteered with them, and that organization is called Wild Virginia. So I do volunteer with Wild Virginia and the Virginia Safe Wildlife Corridors Collaborative. And part of this project that I kind of work with them on is I've been writing a series of articles and on wildlife corridors and crossings, and my first article was what are wildlife corridors and crossings, and why are they important to Virginia? So as you mentioned earlier in the opening, I like to focus on issues that concern the Commonwealth of Virginia, but I'm also branching out a little bit these days outside of Virginia, but I mainly like to concentrate what's going on here in the Commonwealth where I live. The other big conservation photography project that I find very special to my heart is a project I call Butterfly Oasis Habitat Project. And I moved into this house where I'm living now in Hampton in 2021. And after moving in, built a very small little butterfly garden in my backyard because I was concerned about the decline of the population of the monarch butterfly. That kind of inspired me to kind of get some milkweed, some butterfly bushes, and I created a nice little garden. And through the summer, through the fall, I had several dozen monarch caterpillars come through my milkweed, ate it all up. And then I also had some fennel in my yard, so I also had some black swallowtail caterpillars. And so it really became kind of fun and exciting to see that. And so it inspired me to grab my camera and start taking pictures of the butterflies and the caterpillars in my yard. So I did that last summer a lot, and then over the winter, I kind of came up with the idea to create this conservation project on my own, and to where I can document, write stories, take pictures, and try to help the monarch butterflies increase their population. And then this year, I also, in the spring, made a much bigger garden and added a lot more milkweed. Today I had like 42-ish caterpillars in my garden. So I think it's doing well. Hopefully they will all survive. So with that, I also took a course and became um, a, a citizen science for the monarch butterfly data by collecting the data, how many eggs and caterpillars and adults that come through my garden, and I report that data with the monarch larva monitoring project. So that gives me another way to make an important have an important role in trying to increase the population of the monarchs. But I don't solely just concentrate on the monarchs because I love all butterflies and caterpillars. Um, and by the way, this caterpillar, the vertical caterpillar over here is the image of the American butterflies cover. I just thought I'd throw that in. Anyway, so now that we know what conservation photography is, what wildlife conservation photography is, now we can look at some tips at how we can use our wildlife images for conservation purposes. And a lot of these tips are tips that I personally use in building in the last 2 years, building a conservation, wildlife and nature photography and storytelling career, as I'm now become an LLC. So I've taken it totally professional. So the first thing I would suggest, if you're interested in being a conservation photographer or conservation storyteller, or both, or just using your images for conservation purposes, every once in a while. It always helps. It's always helpful, but you want to find what interests you the most. Especially I suggest, starting in your local area. Look for conservation, topics. But one of the big topics here in Virginia is the seabird colony that had to be moved because of our bridge tunnel being under construction to another little island called Port Wool. So there's a conservation project right there. So you can find things in your area, and if you're interested, in birds or certain species or certain habitats, or that is always helpful to be able to connect, and give you a better chance to find key people, especially if you're doing a human interest-based type conservation story. The next is, and I've always set goals for myself. So you want to set goals and make an ultimate goal of what actions you want to have at the end of your story. I mean, do you want, your story to be able to, if it's something endangered and a habitat loss area, do you want your end story to be, making sure that habitat loss area is no longer a problem, so that an endangered species has that place to be, and to continue to have that space to breathe and live. And also, defining your role in conservation photography and storytelling is big, because there are many different ways you can have a role in conservation photography and storytelling. You can do it professionally. You can do it on an amateur basis. as a hobbyist, as somebody who takes an occasional picture, and you can do it as someone who just takes pictures as a conservation photographer, or you can also do it as someone who only takes the pictures and has somebody else write the stories for them, or they only sell their pictures to magazines. And then you also have the storytelling, the writing storytelling conservationists that just tell the stories and look for photographers to get their conservation photography pictures for their stories. And then, you know, as I said, as a hobbyist or somebody who does occasional photography, you know, you can occasionally use an image for a conservation purpose. Some way to make an impact. You know, you just want to define and figure out what you want to do with your role in conservation photography. Also, you want to determine, when you determine your subject, you want to know if you need to know anything about animal behavior of your subject, or if there's federal regulations that affect your story idea. Research is always very important with conservation photography and storytelling. You gotta really dig deep. One, you gotta know if the story's already been told or somebody else is working on it, and should always try to keep a lot of that information under wraps, so nobody knows that you're working on certain stories and stuff. But that is an important part of being a conservation photographer and storyteller, is doing research. Okay, my next tip is, you know, determine your audience. Who is going to be your audience? Will it be decision makers or the general public, or both? You want to really make an emotional appeal to that audience that you want to target. And that it makes your writing and your pictures, your stories that you tell in your pictures and then your writing, it makes that so much more powerful to the audience that you're looking to target to. And like I said, connecting with a local conservation organization in which you have similar beliefs or goals, I think is a great way to get into conservation photography. It's how I really was able to build my conservation photography career, by volunteering with Wild Virginia. I'm a partner photographer, and also I volunteer on the communications team. So I have a couple roles that I play with them, and then occasionally I will donate some of my images for them to use in their conservation campaigns. Also, creating a blog, especially if you're looking at doing this as a career, as a part-time career, you know, whatever way that you're looking to be a part of conservation photography. Creating a blog and writing essays and stories on conservation subjects that mean the most to you is a great way to display a portfolio of conservation photography storytelling, which will bring awareness to your wildlife conservation stories and or if you have wildlife conservation projects. But it also is a great way to bring attention to you as a conservation photographer. It, having a blog has immensely helped me with my conservation photography career. And like I mentioned before, if you're not interested, and not everybody is interested in writing stories. Some people just like to go out and take pictures, and sometimes just going out and taking a hike or a walk, and or just going out for photography purposes without any conservation purposes in the back of your head, that can be useful as well, because later on you may find that image can be used in a conservation purpose that you might not have thought of when you were out in the field taking that picture. And my final tip that I've found to be one of the biggest things that has really helped to get my conservation photography out into the public is the social media platforms. I share my conservation stories and projects with the general public to bring awareness to not only those subjects, like the monarchs. I write a lot about monarchs on my blog, and newsletter, social media. You just never know who you meet out there in social media, and you may find somebody who comes and asks for you to do a presentation or an interview. I've been asked to do interviews, so you just don't know. So I recommend social media. And here I was just going to show a few examples of what I was talking about when I was just going out because I liked photography. I love photography. Going out and taking pictures is what I love the most. It's therapy. It's even therapy for me. So here I was just taking a stroll at a local park area, saw this beautiful deer, took this beautiful image, and later on, while Virginia was interested in using it in a publication, and so that image became, this full-page ad in a local publication for Wild Virginia that they put out. And then this is another little similar case. This is just went to the local park, took a picture of the pelican on the post, and a different conservation organization here in Virginia, Virginia Conservation Network, used this in their common agenda briefing book, which is the policies that Virginia puts together, and conservation policies they put together for the year. So so you never know when you're just out taking pictures that they can be used for conservation purposes. You don't actually have to go out to find a story and take pictures on, but that's good too. just there's just other ways, and just a few more other random pictures that I've taken that have been also published in local conservation publications here in Virginia. The sunrise with the trees. That was actually the real colors of the sky. That was a beautiful sunrise. And the dragonfly, and this is Lake Drummond. So just be aware of when you're out taking pictures, and you go home and you process them, there may be a purpose behind an image that you may find useful for a conservation publication, whether, you submit them to the publication or you decide to donate an image or two. And then finally, these are really the main points that I wanted to share tonight, and that's how your photography can help save the world as a conservation photographer. There is always a story to tell, even if it's in your backyard, like my backyard butterfly garden. Through photography, we all have the power to tell conservation stories and be an advocate for something that truly moves you or a subject that you want to protect. And as photographers, we always have the opportunity to document the changes in our natural world. And we can share those with others, so those that are not as aware become more aware of the changes that we have in our wildlife habitats, the wildlife defragmentations, the wildlife crossing issues. So, but mainly your wildlife images just can have a powerful effect and can help save the world or a wildlife species, just as I was talking about with the wildlife crossings. By here in Virginia, working on the wildlife crossings and corridors, that very well may save a deer, a bear, raccoon's life, if we can get that legislation passed here in Virginia. So these are some of the tips that I've used to create a conservation career in photography and storytelling. And if you like to reach out to me, you can find me everywhere. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Flickr. So that's all that I have. Does anybody have any questions? So
there is a question. I'm going to get you to take your screen down and let me look for it real quick.
Okay.
Mika had a question. She was curious about which social media do you find is the most effective for this purpose?
Most effective. The main two that I use is Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah.
At first, when I first started those two, I found Twitter to be the most effective. And it's still very effective. But lately I've been getting more off of Instagram, and often too, when I use social media, like I said, I like to do research. I also look at the likes. What images are people liking, on my social media, or where they're making contacts, and so that helps me when I do like photography exhibits. I know what images are popular and what may sell. So there's a lot of ways to use social media, but right now, I've really been finding Instagram a little bit more helpful, but Twitter is still a very great tool, and I am on them both every day.
Okay. Anne has a question in here. She wanted to know, how did you figure out what to charge for your images and text? Is that something, I know sometimes when we're working with magazines, they have a set price for
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they have a budget, and they'll say, this is what we're going to pay you for a cover. This is what we're going to pay you for a story with photos. So is that kind of your experience?
yes, it is. Just about probably 99%, of the magazines do have their own prices, what they're gonna give you for a text article package, or or just a cover image, or just an image that's used in a in the publication. They have their own prices so that they can charge,
Okay.
um, um, or pay you, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's kind of been my personal experience. And then basically anytime you're working with a magazine, a print magazine, or even in a digital sense, magazines they have a rate. So they kind of keep it, kind of in I won't say universal, but universal to them. So that sounds great. Dawn is curious, if an image of yours is used as a cover, are you prohibited from selling it privately?
um, that's a good question. I don't see prohibited from selling it privately.
Mhm.
Um, if it's a copyrighted, if you copyrighted your images, um, and you did not give your copyright to a publisher,
That's correct.
for that cover, you still own the copyright of their image, and you still can do what you would like to do with that. And I do highly suggest copywriting, with the U.S. Copyright Office, all images.
Yeah.
But but I haven't had that experience. So
Yeah. It's part of the well, I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's part of the licensing. So if a lot of printers, publishers will ask for first rights. Let us be the first to publish it. And that's
yeah,
what they will almost insist on.
right,
They don't care, they don't seem to care what you do afterwards, because they are just paying for that one-time usage.
right,
When I have somebody I know who's sold his images, they were on the first iPhone boxes. And somebody contacted him, representing an agency who was, working with Apple. And they said, hey, how much are your photos? And he's, he threw a number, and the person on the other end laughed and said, that's not really what we're going to pay you. We're going to give you a couple of other zeros. And it worked out really well for him. But he
right.
basically gave up rights to those images. But it seems like magazines don't seem to be as interested in that. It's kind of a one-time use. They just prefer that it's never been published before. But you can,
Yeah,
you can print. You own it. You've not given away the rights and deleted them off your hard drive. So hopefully that
yeah.
kind of answered.
You're very correct with that.
Yeah. Okay. Donna says, you've mentioned entering contests. I have noticed quite a few contest rules that require you to give up your rights to the image. Has this been your experience?
Well, if that is a stipulation, I do not enter those contests.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's really good.
I haven't had that
Yeah.
happen to me so far.
Yeah, that is in the fine print, Donna. That was one of the things that we covered, or when I say we, I was in the audience, that Paul Malinowski talked about in his presentation last week about cracking the code on photo contests. It varies from contest to contest. Now, I will say, um, I entered nature.org's natural is the Nature Conservancy contest several years ago. It was one of the first contests that I entered. Probably I've only entered like 3 contests. That was like probably my first or second one. And it turned out to be an image that resonated with a judge who then kicked it to the state level, uh, specifically for them to, hey, you guys need to look at this. And they are like, we just need you to sign off so we can publish it. Um, I didn't lose my rights, but they wanted to be able to use it for, supporting what they were doing. And that was something I was okay with because of what the organization was. But read those
Yes.
fine prints, because
Yeah.
you don't want to get in a
Yes, you do.
situation where you lose your stuff.
No,
Um,
you don't. You
yeah,
don't.
yeah.
I
But they're
agree. Read
very,
every little word.
yeah, but they're very specific, and you get a feel for, there's some shisty contests out there, I think, and then there are some very, very, really legit ones. So it just it just depends.
Yeah,
Um,
and I usually only enter ones that are, you know, really legitimate. And um, and I do enter, here in Virginia, I do enter a few local contests.
mhm,
Um, and I've done well in those local photo contests, but they also, I still read those rights, even though they're local,
mhm,
based, that they're not national wildlife or nature conservancy type
mhm.
photo contest, but I still read every little word,
Yeah,
to make sure you don't
you give
lose
up the
that
rights.
right for that image, because that you just never want to give rights away for your
Okay.
images.
Okay, so I'm gonna Anne's question is, what does having an LLC do for you?
An LLC,
Mhm.
um, well, it just makes me a formal business for sure. Uh,
It,
it's really nothing too much different.
yeah,
As in, what I'm doing, as photography, it's just, but better bookkeeping and,
yeah,
um, business type,
yeah.
um,
It helps with
and
it keeps your just kind of general thing is it keeps your books separate. It helps with you taxes.
yeah,
It also protects your personal assets. So
it,
I mean,
it,
that's the reason that,
it
people do it.
yeah, yeah,
Is
it
to,
does. And a lot of photographers, professional photographers are LLCs, to give them that extra protection. A lot of photographers do workshops and
it
things
helps.
like that
Yeah.
really benefits them in ways. So
It also helps.
but it was just, to me, I have my own photography business. It is mine, so well, just, I just did it a couple months ago,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
it's all new to me still.
Yeah, and I have to be careful of this because we don't want to make it, giving legal advice, because that's something we can't do. But if you are starting to sell or wanting to do workshops, needing to get insurance, those are things that will help you as a business owner. And it really does establishes you as, there's a little shingle there. And when people are going to pay you money to take them on these big trips, they feel like, it's not just you're going to run off with their money. It's a legitimate protection for you and your business. So
Yes, very true.
okay, I'm not seeing anything else. Lori, this was a very, very well thought out presentation.
Thank you.
One of the social medias, I think we talked about it. I'm not sure who was on. I know it wasn't on the recording, but social media. I love it. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. That's where I have met a lot of my friends and other photographers. A lot of people in this room I've met through Instagram, but I've not met in person. But it's kind of fun to have, people that like what you like, and it's nice to have friends that support you and kind of push you forward. But Lori and I met through LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
So that,
Yes, we did.
I've been trying to encourage people to try different forms of social media. It's one more outlet to get your work out there. LinkedIn is really one of those places where you're just putting your stuff out there and you're looking for a job. But as a photographer, yeah, there's going to be some photography jobs, but who cares about those? But there are all these other people that are going to find you, and they could be business owners like lawyers or doctors that need art. And that is where
Yes.
they live, is on LinkedIn. Or, so it's another place it's a slow growing kind of space, but it's a place where you can say, I was just published, and you can and kind of build your little resume in the photography world. So
Yes.
that's one of the things that has helped me, is putting those little, I was published here, or this is this is the project I'm working on. And I have had people approach me, hey, this is our project, can you help us? And it's because they're finding me on LinkedIn. These types of professionals are not hanging out on Instagram with me. They are looking for somebody to provide them with images for their business newsletters or whatever their project is. So it's just
Yes.
one more place. A different audience is going to find you. So with that, I'm going to thank you for coming and doing this. I know this is getting a little late on your end because you're on the East Coast, but really enjoyed your presentation. It was lovely to meet you. And when people come and give up their time to somebody they met on social media like me, I'm a little overwhelmed and appreciative, and I and it was excited to have you. So thank you for hanging in there and coming and doing this for my group.
Well, thank you very much, Linda, for inviting me. It's been an honor and privilege to share and talk about conservation or wildlife conservation photography with everyone. And it's always fun to meet new people, and hopefully maybe we'll see a few names I see that I've connected on Instagram as well. So maybe be able to connect more
Yeah, it's a
with other
pretty
folks.
cool thing. All right. You guys can connect with Lori through her website, loriacash.com, and on Instagram at LACashPhoto. And I'll include those links in the show notes. We're off next week, but please join us on September 7th when astrophotographer Sherry Hunt joins us to share some tips in her presentation using photo pills for night sky photography. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and hope that we see you again soon.